Welcome everyone to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to be looking at some more to do with specific inventory control, kind of following our theme for this month. And today we're going to be looking specifically at variants. Variants are essentially different versions of a similar product that you can use to keep track of exactly what it is that you have available to sell and how many of those you're selling, so that you can keep track more piecemeal of those specific elements. Kind of along those lines, we're going to be also diving into accessory packages and breakdown SKUs, exactly what those are and how you can take advantage of those, again, to have that much more greater control over your inventory. It must be a Friday. Before we get into all of that, though, as per our usual idiom, we are using GoToWebinar and just a few housekeeping rules with that process or with that utility. There is a toolbar that you have access to on your screen, and that little toolbar has a questions box. So if at any point you have a question relating to today's topic and content, feel free to go ahead and punch that into the questions box. I'm going to be periodically checking those incoming questions and trying to answer those as best as I can throughout today's session. And of course, we will, as always, have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. And also, in relation to that GoToWebinar toolbar, if it is taking up too much space on your screen, there's a little orange button with a white arrow on it, usually hanging out on one side or the other. You can click on that button and that will shrink it down so that way you can focus on what we are covering. So we got quite a bit to look at today. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time, but I want to kind of focus solely on AIM-SI today. So I'm right in there to begin with. So let's go ahead and jump in. Now, in relation to variants, now if you're coming from earlier versions of AIM-SI, variants did technically exist in versions 11 and older. We referred to it back then as a matrix. So in the matrix element in versions 11 and older, there were really only two things that matrix tracked, and that was a different color and a different size. So essentially what it would stand for in older versions is that if you had a product, say a particular instrument or a particular firearm or a particular vacuum, and it came in different colors and or sizes, but it was, when it's all said and done, it was essentially the same product. What you could do is you could build that in as one model line with different SKUs, and each different SKU might have some kind of different suffix on it or something along those lines. In other words, if it was ABC123 model line, the SKU might be ABC123 G for the green version, ABC123R for the red version, etc. Now with version 12, you have the ability to expand on that concept and create your own variants. So that plays back into what we talked about way long ago. I think it was even back in December or January when we talked about how attributes work. So with attributes, you essentially have complete control over how your variants are going to be tracked and displayed. So if we go into inventory maintenance, so maintenance and inventory, we're going to start off with just kind of briefly going over again the whole concept of attributes. So when you go to set up attributes here in inventory, all the various attributes that you'll be tracking, you'll set up on this table. And on this table, you can see we've got a number of these in our system ready to go. We've got things like composers and arrangers. There's the color and size. There's a year, finish, material, pages, things like that. And that also reminds me, if we're getting back to versions 11 and older, there were specific fields kind of relating to sheet music that are also covered here as far as the variants are concerned. So things like composers and arrangers, you're probably not going to have different variants relating to that, but attributes are going to play a part in this whole variant process. So again, thinking about color and size, you can see that they're essentially just set up here as attributes, and you can apply different attributes at the subcategory level, because not every different type of inventory you have in your system is probably going to use that same attribute. You can see if I look at the composer attribute here in my system, these are solely entered into what we call our print categories. So print choral, print guitar, print instrumental, etc. Whereas if I go and take a look at color, these are in kind of more of our inventory categories, things like band and orchestra, fretted, accessories, and so forth. Now, for the firearms industry, other attributes that would come into play in this case would be things like caliber, finish, magazine capacities. If we're talking about bicycle and fitness, this would be things like different frame sizes, different model years. If we're talking about vacuum and sewing, these might be different canister capacities, different wattages. When it's all said and done, if you're basically looking at these products, they usually share a base model, but then the variants beyond that kind of play a part in exactly what that product is, kind of as a sub item to that model, if that makes any sense. So it starts here at the attribute level when we're talking about our variants. And like I said, you apply those to the subcategory. Now, there's essentially two different ways to create variants. And we're going to look at a variant first of all, just so that you can kind of get the idea of how this might look. So I've got an example variant model in my system. I'm actually going to go back to the modules menu, to inventory, and to display inventory. I'm just going to do a quick search here because I don't recall exactly what category or anything like that it was under, but this will bring up my inventory, and right here at the top we have a variant product. So you can see underneath the SKU line, because variants are tracked at the SKU level, you can see that the model in this case, let me grab my little highlighter tool just to try and again bring some light to this. So you can see how the model is what it is. So in this case, it's 0117000, but the SKU is labeled specifically as a variant. So again, what we're basically doing here is we're saying that there are multiple options for this particular, in this case, Fender Stratocaster. And when you'll notice that when we highlight that line item, the variants tab up at the top becomes available to select. So any other item here, you can see up at the top, variants are not available, and I'm also clicking on some accessory items, so the serials tab isn't available either. Of course, if I click to a serialized item, the serials tab is available, but that's not the topic of today. Let's go back to the variants and let's take a look at this variants tab. So you can see here that I've got, in this case, two SKUs, an SL and an SB. There's the concept of what I talked about with as far as it usually shares the same model as kind of a base or a core, and then expands from there. So in this case, there's an SL and an SB. The SL, we can see, has a color label of silver, and the SB has a color label of sunburst. Now, essentially what we're going to see is the total and available quantities here. They happen to be 2 and 3 respectively for both of these. But if there were any other variants in play here, you're basically going to kind of go down the list. You can see how there is a finish attribute, the material attribute, the size and the year, etc. But they don't have anything in them because those, in this case, these attributes don't apply to the item, in this case, the guitar. But what does apply is the color. So what you could do here is, when, let's say you're looking up particular bits of inventory, and let's say that the customer is gung-ho about getting this product in a certain color or size, or again, whatever the attribute is, you can use the contains box, like we've talked about in other webinars, to look for a specific whatever it is that the customer is specifically looking for. So in this case, if I say, well, they're looking for silver, I can type silver into the contains box underneath the color column, and then it would show me all of the other options where silver is at play. And obviously, this is just a very basic attribute. This is a very basic variant. So there's just the one or the other in this case. But if there were, let's say, other sizes of this guitar, let's say it came in standard and 3/4 or other size options like that, we might see that silver option listed multiple times, both one for the 3/4 and then another silver for the standard size. So that's kind of the idea behind how variants work. Now, as far as creating them, let's go ahead and take a look at a new piece of inventory. We're going to go into Add Change Inventory, and we're going to go to Add Inventory. Now, the way this works, if you know that you want to create a variant from scratch, is on the Add Inventory screen, you're going to do what you always do. You're going to select the category and the subcategory. I'm just grabbing some here for whatever it is. Let's go ahead and create this ABC123 model. It's going to be a bell kit. Now over here in the SKU field, you can preemptively key in the variant SKUs. So let's say there's going to be an ABC123SL, an ABC123SB. I don't know why there'd be a silver and a sunburst bell kit. But let's also say that they're going to come in different sizes. So let's do ABC123S and ABC123, let's do ABC123SLM and an ABC123SLL, and I'll talk about what these are in just a moment. Let's also do an SBS, an ABC123SBM, and an ABC123SBL. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating what the SKUs are going to be preemptively. Now, of course, we can put in our various price points. Let's just say that these cost us $4. They retail for $15. We're gonna sell them for $13.95. That basically doesn't change from any other type of process that you probably are familiar with if you've been keying in inventory. Let's go ahead and proceed with this, and this will take us to the SKUs tab, and you can see it's got all of those SKUs laid out for us. Now what we can do is we're highlighted currently on the SLS. We can come over here and we can specify what the attributes are for this specific SKU. So in this case, let's say that this is going to be the color silver and the size small. And then we'll go ahead and we will save that. And then we'll go down here to the SLM, and this is going to be silver medium, and save that. So basically the idea here is you're just kind of going down the list, and I probably created a bit too many for what I wanted to talk about here today, but let's just go ahead and crank them out here. So silver large, and we'll save that. Then we'll go to the sunburst, and this is going to be small, and save. And then medium, sunburst. My own perfectionist is getting in my way. Medium, and finally sunburst large. So essentially that's going to be how you can create a variant from scratch. Now if you did need to, you could technically go in and you could specify different price points for different variants. If we come over to the locations tab, for example, you can see that all those SKUs that I created are up here at the top. So I could go from one to the other, and if necessary, I could make price adjustments for, let's say, the larger ones versus the smaller ones, or maybe they come in a kind of a limited edition model line or product line. Let's say there's like a gold one that is maybe a little bit more expensive, and so you might want to go in and tweak the prices on that particular variant. But that's kind of the idea of how this works. And as you can see, of course, each particular SKU then is its own entity. They just all happen to share a top level model number. So that's kind of the idea of how variants work. They are essentially all their own SKUs. Let's go ahead and save this, and now let's take a look at this back in display inventory. So if I go back up to display inventory, and let's just search for Bell just to find that nice and quick here. So this should bring back my variant there for Bell Kit. Again, you can see that it's sharing that ABC123 model, and it is a variant. So if we go to the variants tab, now you can see here there are all those silvers and sunbursts, and if I was looking specifically for the large size of Bell Kit, I can start typing that in, and I see exactly that it comes in the silver and the sunburst and what those quantities that I have on hand happen to be. So that's the idea of how you can use variants in your day-to-day processes for finding what you have available for your customers and making sure that you're ordering what you need to order. And of course, because these are all individual SKUs, they fall into that same process we talked about earlier this week, with them all having, of course, their own min-maxes, their own sales performances. And so if you down the road discover that one of these variants isn't selling as well as the other, you might wind up phasing out some of the size or color options because they don't sell, or whatever the case may be. And so just wanted to make that mention there as well. That's essentially what I wanted to cover about creating new variants from scratch. Now, let's say that you have some existing product and you want to blend them or merge them into a variant so that you have the ability to browse a table like this to see what you have available at a glance. Because technically, we could have very well easily just created all of these as their own individual items, but then they'd be on this list, and it's a little bit harder to browse when they're all kind of scattered across this display inventory results page versus the variants tab where we have the ability to filter by the different attributes. So let's say that you have some items that you want to merge into a variant. How can we go about doing that? Well, if we go back to the utilities menu here in modules and inventory, you'll see that there is a create variant option. Now, when you create a variant from existing inventory, what it wants to know is what is the model number that's going to be the top level item. So you can see up at the top here, it says model number to be merged into. I'm going to select good old RT14 as my model number to merge. And you can see that it brings up the RT14 that we have at both our Dubuque and Iowa City locations. There is a field here for the applicable variant that this product happens to come in this case, finish. You can see how it's empty right now. So what I can then do is down below where it says SKU to merge into this model, I can select any other SKUs that I have in my system, and I can basically bring those in. And then if the relevant attributes are empty at this time, I could go ahead and I could fill in what the variant needs to be. So in this case, let's say that the finish for RT14, not that this is really a finished product, but it doesn't really have a finish because it's valve oil. But let's say that this one comes in, I don't know, green, and this one comes in black. So again, basically just the idea of having something in there to search on as far as your variant is concerned. When we go ahead and save that, what that will do now is if we go back and look in our inventory, so we'll go back to the Add Change Inventory screen and we'll look at Change Inventory. Now, if I pull up RT14 or RT15, what we're going to see is that on the main tab, it will share that model of RT14. And if we go to the SKUs tab, there's the RT14 and there's the RT15, each of them with their respective attribute of green and black. And then of course, likewise, what that means is if we go and use display inventory to search for our variants, they will now show up there essentially at the top of the list as being a variant. There's our valve oil. And of course, if we take a look at the variant tab, we can see that there they are right there for us, the RT14 and the 15. Now let's flip that on its head and let's say, oh shoot, actually I've got something in here that really doesn't qualify to kind of be merged into this kind of thought process or this concept of a variant table. How can I break them out of this variant concept? Well, back in that same utilities menu, just below create variant is breakout variant SKU. So let's go ahead and break that RT15 back out of there, because technically I believe the RT15 is slide oil or some other kind of option there. I don't remember exactly what it is. I don't ever use it. But let's say we're going to break out the RT15 and we're going to change the model number to be the same as the SKU, because what happens is it essentially says, okay, when it gets merged into that variant SKU, the model number gets replaced with whatever it's being replaced into. So in this case, it was replaced into RT14. We're going to make it be its own model again. So we're going to change the model number to be the same as the SKU. So let's go ahead and break that out, and it will say that the entered SKU is no longer part of that variant. So now if we go back to our change inventory, so we'll bring this up, we'll go to RT14, and we will see that on the RT14 model, the SKU is no longer containing RT15. It's just got the RT14 there. And likewise, if we go ahead and research now for the RT15, we will see that it is, once again, its own product, and it is its own SKU as well. So that's, again, kind of the idea there of looking up products, or not looking at products, but breaking products out from a variant should they be in a variant that doesn't necessarily make sense. Let's go ahead and switch gears now. And of course, again, if you have any questions on that, feel free to go ahead and punch that into my questions box. It's looking like my webcam is kind of getting a little funky here, so I might kill the webcam for now. I don't want it to potentially muck with the actual live stream here. I want to make sure I'm coming through loud and clear for you. So I'm just going to kill that for now. Not that you were really all coming here to see me. You were coming here to see variants and breakout SKUs, or excuse me, breakdown SKUs. Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I meant to say, and that's what I said. So before we get into breakdown SKUs, we're going to talk a little bit more about accessory packages. Now, accessory packages are something that we had prior to the addition of breakdown SKUs in AIM-SI. It's essentially a very simplistic version of breakdown SKUs. The concept of breakdown SKUs is that you have a product that you purchase from a supplier, or maybe you even make it in-house. In one way, shape, or form, you have a product that you sell perhaps as kind of like a bulk package, but then also maybe that you sell in individual units, or that you sell as kind of like a smaller version of the original package. So outside of these industries, maybe where folks aren't as familiar with music stores or gun stores or vacuum stores, I think every one of us at one point or another has shopped at the grocery store. And so let's say that you go into the grocery store and you buy your 6-pack of soda or whatever it might be. You might also notice that the individual cans are also available for sale, the individual cans or bottles. Now, in most cases, I can't say with certainty if this is the case all the time, but what's probably the case is that grocery store or that convenience store, whatever it is, they didn't buy individual cans to sell. Instead, what they have done is they ordered the product in a bulk package size. Maybe that was a case, maybe that was the 6-packs, whatever the case may be. They want to sell individual cans because, well, some folks don't want to buy a whole 6-pack. They just want to buy one can or one bottle, and they want to pay for that smaller amount because that's all they intend to drink. But it also technically, of course, in some cases can give the store a little bit of an advantage as far as profit margin. You can sell one can for a larger profit margin than you could potentially sell a 6-pack, then you could sell a 12-pack, then you could sell a 24-pack, etc. So that's kind of where breakdown SKUs came from, is you can put in all of the SKUs that are relevant to what you sell. So you could have a SKU for the 24 pack, a SKU for the 12 pack, a SKU for the 6 pack, and a SKU for the single. And then by using the breakdown SKU functionality, you can link them all together. And by saying that you're creating, let's say you're creating 18 individual quantities, you're bringing it in a quantity of 18 of the individual can. You're essentially opening 3 6-packs. So you could say you're breaking down 3 of the 6-pack SKU, and you're bringing in 18 of the individual SKU. So that's the concept. Now, without having to set all of that up, let's say that the inventory that you have in your system as far as these breakdown possibilities go is very minuscule. It's just a very small fraction of a percentage of your total inventory. So rather than setting up breakdown SKUs, because maybe very rarely do you actually go through this process of breaking them down, but you do want to have the occasional ability to sell an individual item. You don't normally stock them, but you can certainly open them up that way. That's where, if we take a look into modules and inventory, and we take a look in add change inventory, we have an open accessory package. Now I'm going to pretend for my demonstration here that the RT14 and the RT15 are the package and the single. So I'm going to say that the package SKU is RT15. Let's say that the RT14s are the individual valve oils, and the RT15s are the 6-pack. So we're going to say, we're going to enter the individual of RT14, and then we're going to say number of packages to break down. Let's say we're going to open 1 package. So this is going to reduce RT15 by a quantity of 1. And we're going to say that that package contains 6 of the single item. So before I do this, just really quickly, I'm going to go back to change inventory. I'm going to bring up RT14, and we're going to notice over here on the locations tab, we currently have a quantity of 30. And if I go and look at RT15, we also, for that, have a quantity of 30. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this. And that has now saved. So let's go back to change inventory. Let's pull up RT14. And what we're going to see is that we now have 36 of the RT14. And if we switch to the RT15, we're going to see we just have 29 of those. So that's kind of the idea there. You can essentially swap out one for the other in case of, and for the music industry as an example, this might be very relevant for things like reeds. Maybe in this case, just to give the analogy, the RT15 is the box of 10 reeds, and the RT14 is the individual reed itself. So maybe you just sell them normally by the box, but you also have the option of selling the individual reed if the customer just needs the one reed to get by for the day or the week or whatever it might be. So you can certainly use the open accessory package to accomplish that. Now, if this is something that happens on a regular basis, it may be worthwhile to create a breakdown SKU association with that. So let's take a look at that. Let's go over into maintenance this time. So we'll go to maintenance, and we're going to go to inventory. And here in inventory is the maintain breakdown SKUs program. When we look at maintain breakdown SKUs, this is going to be a listing of any existing breakdown SKUs that you have created. Let's go ahead and use our example of the RT14 and RT15. So we're going to say that the SKU is RT14 and the base SKU is also RT14 and the base unit is 1. I'm just going to go ahead and save that. We're going to add another listing, and we're going to say that in this case the SKU is RT15 and the base SKU is RT14 and the base units is 6. So again, basically what we're doing is we're now linking RT15 to RT14. I'm not sure why the RT didn't get in there. There we go. So let's go ahead and save that. So we can see RT15 is the SKU, RT14 is the base SKU, and the base units is 6. And you'll notice when I hover over these, the base SKU field, it gets you that little reminder there of this should be the SKU of the item with the smallest quantity that that is part of this item chain. So that's kind of like the idea there, is that this is the base SKU is always the smallest one. And in this case, this is the quantity of the single item contained within this SKU. So that's essentially how that works. Now, the way this works is one of two ways. Actually, let me bring that program back up. What you could technically do is you could create what's called an auto replenishment SKU. You can see how it says this is the only item that will be suggested to replenish this SKU if its quantity drops below 0 during a sale. You would do that at the base SKU entry. So you could say the auto replenishment SKU in this case might be RT15. So what that essentially means is this is going to kind of help to automate the whole idea of breaking down SKUs. Let's say that in reality, you probably run a pretty busy store, and let's say that in the heat of point of sale, you noticed that the customer wanted to buy one of these RT14s, but you didn't have one available to sell. But you see that you have the 6-pack of the RT15 sitting right there. So without doing anything in the computer, you go ahead, break the RT15 case open. You now put 5 of the RT14s back on the shelf. You grab one RT14 and you scan it through to point of sale. Now, as far as the quantity of inventory was concerned, you were sitting at 0 of RT14, knock on wood, assuming that your quantities are correct. And what this would have normally done if we didn't have this auto replenishment set up is you would have gone into the negative of RT14, and it wouldn't have impacted the RT15 at all. You would have basically seen that you were sitting at a negative of the RT14 SKU, and your RT15 was still sitting at whatever it was sitting at. Let's say it was sitting at the 30, but when you're eyeballing your stock, you say, well, I only count 29. Well, that's because you actually had opened one and you just didn't go in to actually key that in. By setting up this auto replenishment, what it would have done was it would have seen that you were sitting at 0 of RT14, and then it saw that you were trying to sell one. Because this now exists, it would go ahead and say, oh, he or she must have opened up one of the RT15s to complete the sale. And so it would go ahead and it would break down enough of the RT15 or enough of the auto replenishment SKU to complete the sale. Let's say hypothetically that you had sold 6 or not 6, but let's say you sold 7 of the RT14s just individually. Let's pretend that you didn't sell one RT15 and one RT14. Let's say you sold 7 RT14s. It would then essentially break down 2 of the RT15s because it would have seen, oh, you're at 0 or you're going below into the negative. How many of these do we need to open up to complete the sale? So that's basically what that would do. Now, this other little checkbox here, this suppress notification during auto SKU breakdown, basically, if you check mark that, it's just going to happen. It's not going to notify you at the time of point of sale that that breakdown took place. It's basically going to happen kind of behind the scenes, if you will. So let's go ahead and save that. Now, that's one way of letting the system accomplish that for you, but let's say that you like to keep some RT14 in stock on the shelf at all times, and you happen to see, oh, I'm running low on that. Let's go ahead and open up some RT15s to replenish our RT14. You can do that via the modules menu. Let's actually stick with the on-screen menus because I think they're a little bit easier to follow. So we'll go back to main, we'll go to modules, we'll go to inventory, and we'll go to utilities. And here in the utilities menu is a breakdown SKUs program. We'll go ahead and we will click on that. And what we're looking at here now is up at the top, it says show base SKUs where the quantity available of any SKU in that chain is less than X. Now, this is essentially a way of kind of seeing, okay, what do we have that we're running low on that we could replenish with some of the products. So let's say that this is sitting, we want this to show anything that's less than 40, just because that way I can bring this RT14 up. So we see here the RT14 comes up as far as the base SKU that we would like to replenish. We can see that there's 36 of RT14s on hand. We want to get that back up to at least 40. And we do happen to have an RT15. We have 29 of those. So what we can do is we could basically say that we want this to go out and this to come in. So what we can do is basically say we're going to take this out and we're going to bring these in. And you can kind of see how this is showing basically what we're doing. We're not doing that in, we're just basically doing that out. So total base units out, total base units in. We're actually doing, apologize, my brain just kind of locked up there. Essentially what we're doing is we're allocating 6 base units. So when we go ahead and we save that, I'm pretty sure I got that correct. Let's see here, the total must be 0. Okay, that's right. So we're allocating 6 of these to the RT14. So now when we go ahead and we save that, now that will be sitting at 42 and that will be down by its 1. So that's kind of how that works. You basically can break that out into different levels. Now this is especially true if there are more than 2 units in this chain. So if we go back to my original example of 24s, 12s, 6s, and 1s, as far as like the cans or the bottles, we might actually create from one 24 pack, we might create 1 12 and 2 6s, or we might create 1 12, 1 6, and 6 1s. So basically this allows you to kind of pick and choose not only where you're taking it from, but also where it's going to, if that makes sense. Now, in most cases, you're probably just going to have these 2 units within the chain, but that's basically how the breakdown SKUs works. So I believe in most cases, I don't know actually, I'm trying to think if there were any reports related to breakdown SKUs, and I don't think there are. Excuse me. But yeah, that's basically, quite honestly, I blew through that content pretty quick. That is the idea behind how you can manage this inventory. Now, actually, there are a couple of other things I did want to talk about, kind of building on what we spoke about both on Monday and on Wednesday in relation to these min-maxes and maintaining these items. Because again, let's say that you buy just the largest unit and then you disperse from there. So what you don't want to have happen is you don't want the system to potentially say you need to order X number of these single cans because you never actually buy, you never buy the cans individually. You buy them based on the larger caseload, or the bulk SKU item that it comes in. So how can you prevent the system from potentially recommending to order singles or whatever the base SKU is? So if you recall, if you were in attendance on Wednesday, or if you reviewed that webinar, if we go back to change inventory and we pull up, let's say, the RT14, because that's our base SKU here in this case, on the locations tab, we could go in and we could essentially say that this is going to be exempt from min-max recalculation. And then we can zero out, if there happens to be any numbers in here, we could zero out the min and the max. What you might also want to do is you may want to remove the vendor of these individuals. Now, that's not absolutely necessary, but that can be helpful just to keep an idea of where you actually get these products from. Or you might even create a vendor all of your own, just of your own individual store. These are just kind of thoughts that I've had as I've worked with clients over the years, as far as making sure that they don't accidentally try and order something that they don't normally order because maybe they just forgot that it came in a larger pack or something along to those lines. But that's kind of the idea there, is by exempting these from min-max recalculation and then making sure you zero out the min-max, the system will never want to recalculate mins and maxes for your smaller base units, and then they will thus will of course also never come up to reorder when you're going through a stock order process. I believe that is everything that I wanted to chat about today. Like I said, I didn't pace myself very well here today, but quite honestly, that does leave us quite with a little bit extra time here as far as any questions or answers relating to breakdowns, packages. If you've even got any other questions somewhat related to inventory in general or anything else that I can help out with. Otherwise, we could maybe even call this an early out for the week. Coming up, not next week, but 2 weeks from now, following our standard webinar schedule on Monday the 25th, for those of you who are in the firearms industry, we are going to be looking at the serial acquisition function. So for your ATF report, how that comes about and how you can make sure that you have that accurate at all times. So you can produce that for when you need to. On the 27th, Wednesday, March 27th, we'll be looking at multi-store inventory management. So for those of you who either have 2 or more locations, store locations, even if that's just one location is the store and the other location is an overstock warehouse, how you can manage all of that. And then on Friday the 29th will be lease pool inventory. So for those of you who are managing any kind of rental inventory, and the idea there is you might be keeping it multiple years and you would like to depreciate its cost value over maybe 3 or 5 or X number of years, we'll be taking a look at how that gets set up and maintained. And then as far as the month of April, since we're here at mid-month, let's talk about April. So the plan is to continue doing Monday, Wednesday, Fridays into April. Following our pattern here, we would be looking at April 8th, 10th, and 12th, and the 22nd, the 24th, and the 26th. My idea is that we will be focusing kind of specifically on accounting related functions in the month of April. We'll do Accounting April just to keep it easy to remember. I don't have the exact schedule finalized yet, but look for that probably in the next week or so here up on our member portal. And of course, we will also be sending out email blasts. We'll be making announcements via social media, so feel free to check those out. And of course, anything that you find handy that you might want to check out, feel free to register for. We do have some questions coming in, so let's make sure we get these answered. Sierra says, I have a quick question. We order specific models of picks, but we sell them in 4 main SKUs based on price. How can I order 20 different SKUs with the vendor, which needs to be on the purchase order, but then receive into one of the 4 main SKUs? Is there an automation for that in the system? So let me just make sure I'm reading this correctly here, Sierra. You said that you order specific models of picks, but you sell them in 4 main SKUs. So in other words, you're kind of doing the opposite way. You're ordering 20 different SKUs because those need to be on the purchase order, but then you're not wanting to track 20 different SKUs in-house. You're just wanting to group them based on price. So I think I'm trying to visualize that. So let's say maybe of the 20 and 4, maybe you've got 5 going into one, 5 going into the second, 5 going into the third, and 5 going into the fourth. What I'm thinking you would do is you would kind of be doing, you might actually, so kind of thinking on the fly here, Sierra, I'm thinking what you could probably do is use the open accessory package and you're probably gonna kind of do it one by one at a time. You could actually, technically, what you could even do is you could just, well, these are accessories, so you would basically just go in and let me look through the menus here just to see if there are some examples that we might be able to use for that, because there's not really a transfer from one to the other, but you could potentially use the open accessory package. You could say that you're essentially going to go in and you're going to say that you're going to kind of do this 5 times. You're going to say that, let's say SKUs 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to go into SKU A, and you're going to break down however many you're pulling, and you're going to put them all in there. So kind of 1, A, and then you're transferring 5 and 1. So you're basically moving 5 of this into 5 of these, and then you're going to do 2A and 5 and 1. So 3 and A. Does that make sense, Sierra? And again, I'm kind of thinking on the fly here. That's an excellent question. And I'm thinking there's probably multiple ways to get it done, but that's the one I'm kind of thinking of that might be the easiest. And what that would also essentially do is it would show in the inventory history that you are kind of doing that transfer. So yeah, I'm glad that makes sense. There's probably other ways to go about doing it. If I happen to think of any others that might be even easier, I will get back to you via email or phone call. But yeah, I think that would be a good way of handling that. Thank you very much for the question, as always, Sierra. Chris asks, when you have a SKU for a hardware pack that includes multiple SKUs, is there a way to break that open to show quantity 1 for each SKU in the box? They would be different SKUs. So again, let me try and think this through here, Chris. You're saying when you have a SKU for a hardware pack that includes multiple SKUs. So in other words, you get one pack SKU, let's say that's pack 1, and maybe there's several different SKUs within it. So SKUs A, B, C, D, and E. Is there a way to break that open to show quantity 1 for each SKU in the box? I think that's what I'm hearing you're saying there, and let me know if I'm correct on that. So basically, okay, yeah, that's what you were saying there. You know, I want to say that there was a way of doing that, and now maybe because it is Friday and I've drank too much water, I can't seem to recall where that function might lie. Because again, normally what you might do, and obviously this isn't the case in all cases, but you might do what we call a building of a kit or assembling a kit. So let me think more about that one, Chris. I wanted to say that there was something I had come up with at one point that accomplishes that. And I will get back to you on that. By the way, Sierra, I think I think there was an outlying question from Monday as well. Tell you what, I'm going to call you, Sierra. I don't know if I'll be able to call you right away after the session is done here, but I think there was a question that you had on Monday that we wanted to cover. And Chris, I will do the same thing. I'll look into that and I will get back to you. Rachel or Rochelle, I apologize, I'm probably saying it wrong on both accounts, is asking, on POS notes, can you separate invoice notes from ordering notes? We don't need to know must order 6 when we sell an item. So on POS notes, technically, if we're looking at an inventory item, there's the notes field here on an inventory item, and then there's also the POS reminder notes here. There's also an invoice notes section. So depending on where you have that must order 6, it'll show up in different places. So if it's in the invoice notes field, then that would actually show up on the printed receipt. And I don't think you would necessarily want that to be there. The POS reminder would pop up when you add that item to the sale, but it wouldn't show up on the receipt. So that would be just something that would usually pop up to remind the employee about something, maybe like an upsell or something. I think what you would want to have is that note here in this notes field. That's basically an internal note that doesn't show up anywhere except when you're looking at the product in inventory. So I think that's what you'll want to check into on that, Rochelle, or again, Rachel, I apologize. But I think that is what you'll want to look into. You're also asking, is there a way to indicate an item has MAP pricing? And that's an excellent question. As of right now, we don't necessarily have a specific field dedicated to MAP. What I have recommended in the past for clients that are looking to track MAP is to make use of maybe one of these other price fields, maybe price C, for example, and put the MAP into that price. Or you could even put it into minimum price if you never intend to sell below MAP. That will probably, I can't say with certainty, but that may actually change at some point down the road. We may add, in addition to cost, retail, our price, etc., we may add a MAP price field just so that way items that do have a MAP associated with them are more easily recognizable as having that, especially because MAP becomes more prevalent across multiple industries as well. Donnie asks, we sell small items like string winders individually. They only come from the vendor in packages of 48. So assuming the individual SKU is winder and the vendor item number is SW48, including the quantity, how do we set this up to order one SW48 on stock orders by vendor and then winder gets below minimum? So it sounds like you actually have just the one SKU in there, if I'm not mistaken, Donnie. It sounds like you just have the one SKU of winder. Let me leave this up on screen. It sounds like if we go to the SKUs tab here in the vendor info field, you have the item number of SW48, because that's what would actually print out onto the purchase order. So what you would want to do if that is the case, you would probably most easily take advantage of, in the maintenance section and order maintenance, you can set up ordering quantities. So what you could do, Donnie, in this instance is you could come in here and you could say SKU is winder, the minimum quantity is 48 and the order quantity is 1, and you could in the description put in 48 pack or something like that. Then essentially what that will tell the system is whenever winder happens to come up for reordering, you would need to order at least 48 of them. What would actually print out on the purchase order is a multiple of the order quantity based on how many you're ordering. So if you order 48, it'll say order 1 SW48. If you happen to order 96 of them, it would say order 2 48 pack of SW48. So if you never sell the 48 packs individually, that would be my recommendation. And then that way you only have to worry about maintaining the one winder SKU. And I think that would be a little bit easier there for you in that case there, Donnie. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. Dennis it says, responding to Sierra's earlier question, I think she could just have her 4 different store SKUs and then on the vendor tab for each of them list the multiple picks that she gets for that SKU. So let me think about that there, Dennis. So she could just have her 4 different store SKUs and then on the vendor tab for each of them put the multiple picks. I think that the only problem with that there, Dennis, is that she would need to specify that she's ordering 4 or 5 different picks for every one SKU. And since it's just kind of a one-to-one relation, although that being said, well, maybe you could have just the one model with the 4 or 5 different SKUs below it, but you're still technically selling at the SKU level, and it doesn't sound like Sierra wants to do that. That is an interesting thought there, though, Dennis. But that is an interesting thought. So maybe Sierra, if you're still around and you heard that. Maybe see if that makes sense. I guess it ultimately depends on exactly what SKUs you want to just be able to sell at point of sale. By the way, I do see that Sierra is asking in relation to Donnie's question, when you receive the winder, does it receive 1 or does it receive 48? So just following up on Donnie's example there, or Donnie's question, when it's going to be based on when you get to the receive inventory screen, it's going to be based on how many you ordered. So even though on the purchase order it might say only 1 or 2, on the actual receiving screen it would say that you're receiving 48 or 96 of them. So just to respond back to Sierra's addendum question to Donnie. So hopefully that makes sense there for both of you. And like I said, Sierra, if you heard Dennis's thought on how to handle that inventory there for your picks, maybe give that some thought and see if that would make sense for you. Yeah, I think we're followed up on those questions. Moving right along. By the way, thank you so much for all these questions. It definitely helps me out as a presenter. It's not the easiest thing talking to a computer monitor, and I'm never quite sure if people are out there listening or not, or if I put them all asleep. So Rachel, I'm just going to go with Rachel. So if it is Rochelle, I apologize. I'm guessing this is a follow-up to the POS notes or to the map. You're asking, it doesn't show up as a reminder. Oh, so this would be the notes. It said it doesn't show up as a reminder when then it doesn't show up as a reminder if your order is on notes. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm not quite following the the text there. Let me see if I can decipher that. I'm guessing what you're trying to say is if it's not in the invoice notes, then it's not going to show up automatically when you're going to do the order. And if that's the case, I haven't specifically tested that in some time. So yeah, you're saying if the notes is on notes, then it doesn't pop up on ordering. I see what you're saying. So let me look more into that as well. So I'm going to look into the hardware packs for Chris. I'm going to look into the ordering notes for Rachel, and I will get back to both of you on those questions, and also to Sierra in relation to the earlier question. It is Rochelle, okay? Okay, I apologize. All right. So yeah, great questions, and hopefully, actually, that is quite honestly what I believe is one of these benefits of attending these webinars live is definitely I'm getting some great kind of cross client communication and suggestions. So that's what I love about these things. And when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, we're all AIM-SI users. And really what I've always preached as far as AIM-SI is concerned, even though I do these webinars and I do training, I mean, this is my bread and butter. I love training on AIM-SI. But really what I've always told folks is you can use the system in multiple different ways. It doesn't have to be set in stone, a certain process. There is kind of like a best practice that I usually will teach on, but that doesn't always have to be the case. It all depends on what you want to get out of the system, what you want to see. So kind of equating to the tool function, not to say that necessarily when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but you could certainly use different tools in different ways if you need to kind of make do. And again, with AIM-SI, our intention is never to try and make do. But for example, here internally, we have a SKU for support. And obviously, support is not a SKU that you need to replenish, but that's basically how we originally did it way back in the days of DOS, and that's just kind of carried on ever since. So obviously, if we were setting it up now in the present day, we would have set that up as like a non-inventory category because it's basically a service that you sell. But I'm assuming that way back in the day, non-inventory categories weren't a thing in like version 1 of soft music. So you know, if you found a way to make things work, then you know, more power to you. So the ability to share tips and tricks across different AIM-SI users is something that I've always said is a boon to the AIM-SI and TriTech community, as it were. So that being said, that's actually taken us right up to the 2 o'clock hour here. I don't see any other questions coming in. I do have my homework for me with some follow-up to be done with some of our users and our clients here. So thank you so much for attending. For those of you in the firearms industry, I suppose I will be seeing you on March 25th. For everyone else, we'll pick back up on the 27th if that's an interest for you, if you have multiple stores or multiple locations. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you around.